Hi, everybody. I'm Ann Wright, and you see in front of you the question slide. And while that's up, if you need to make a note of how to submit a question to us, you can use this slide. I'm a master gardener and have been since 2013. And I enjoy this group so much because of all that I have learned. My professional career was in nursing, and now I nurse the plants and the weeds that are coming up in my yard. So I've learned a tremendous amount of great stuff through this group and through our workshops, and I appreciate all of your attendance this morning. So my section, I'm going to look at identifying weeds, some common weeds found in the foothills, and with the particular understanding that if you don't know what a particular plant is, and if it's a weed in your mind or in your yard or whatever, you won't know how to eradicate it. Some of the common weeds in Nevada County and the foothill communities is this list. I mean, there are more, but these are some particular ones that I find particularly problematic at my yard down here. I live in Penn Valley. So what grows here may not necessarily grow up in Truckee, for instance, but many of the same weeds do grow along the foothill communities. Some of my least faves in the weed category are the catchweed or bedstraw, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Dallas grass is just finding its lovely home in my lawn. I saved a little bit of lawn for my doggies to play on. Field bindweed has been one that I've been troubled with for a couple of years, and particularly my vegetable garden. And it's a tough one to get rid of. And oxalis and star thistle are also real problems in my yard. Well, not so much the star thistle, because I'm really working on that. It's more found out in our pasture. We have horses, and so the star thistle does come up pretty prolifically in some areas of our property. And foxtails, those are problems with my pets, particularly my doggies like to get them in their ears. So to help us identify what the particular weed is, help is at hand. And the IPM website, IPM stands for Integrated Pest Management. Most of you probably have heard that term. And the UCANR, which is the University of California Agriculture and Natural Resources Department, has a website exactly for IPM. And it's a great website. And it lists, categorizes weeds into 4 groups: the broadleaf, grasses, and sedges. And now if technology is working correctly, I'm going to show you that website real quickly, virtually. So let's see how we can do. Here we go. This is the homepage of the University of California's IPM. And you see these little squares. Some of them are based on agriculture, and this is the category for home garden, turf, and landscape pests. And not only does it help you identify weeds, but it also helps identify insects as well as diseases of landscape and garden plants. So if you can see my little cursor here on the tree, just click on the box and hopefully it'll come up. There it comes. This is the home page, and it says home garden, turf, and landscape pests. And you can scroll down and find what particular plant is that you're having a problem with. But since we're talking about weeds today, I'm going to go over to the left, and there's a weed gallery. I'm going to click on the weed gallery, and what opens up are the categories that I just mentioned of the weeds: the broadleaf, the grass, the sedge, and aquatic plants. And we don't talk too much about the aquatics because they're a particular beast unto their own, and not that many people have ponds. If you do have a pond and are having trouble with aquatic plants that are taking over your pond, then I would suggest you maybe come to this site. So let's take a quick look at broadleaf. If you click on identification, it opens up a whole bunch of pictures of leaves, and that may help you identify the plant further on. Let's look at leaflets. This one we probably all know anyway, but we may not know what that one is. But if you click further on that, it just drills down to individual plants. And you say, oh, that's the one, that's what it is. It's wild radish or whatever is your problem. And then if you click further on that, it will give you information about that particular plant, and then how its habitat, what the seedlings look like, and then how to control it. So it's a very useful website. If you just take a little time and scroll through it, I think you'll find it helpful. Going back to our presentation with any good luck, there we are. Okay, so that's the 4 categories that IPM uses. So we're going to talk about some of these plants. This is bedstraw or catchweed, and it's a good name for it. One of the old-timey names is called cleavers, and I think that's kind of like, you know, the cleavers, weren't that? That was beaver cleavers. No, that takes me back a little ways. Oh, sorry. Anyway, bedstraw has small hooked hairs, and boy, it does stick to everything. It is edible, and historically, it used to be used as a poultice. And the dried plant was used to stuff mattresses, hence the name bedstraw, kind of an interesting plant. Thistles, these are in the aster family. And you can see our lovely master gardener, Darlene, who had a Sow Thistle coming up in her yard. This is a couple of years ago, I believe, maybe year before last. And she let it go because she wanted to see just how tall it would get. Well, it got that tall, and she's standing on the hill, and the plant's down from her. So it's a good, probably 6 feet tall. And on the right is a milk thistle that is kind of a sprawler, and boy, does it have some thorns on it. But you can see how big that plant is compared to my little dog's ball. That's about a 3-inch ball, and that's Sarah, my dog's ball. And I just thought it landed there, and I thought, well, no wonder she left it there. She didn't want to go retrieve it. So. My nemesis here on the left is field bindweed, but it's kind of pretty, you know. It is in the morning glory family, but you have to get, the roots can extend down 25 feet or even more into the ground. I mean, it's a long-rooted pest, and if you don't get each piece of the root, it will come up again. But it has pretty flowers that are very similar to the regular cultivated morning glory, but this one is a wee bit more invasive. It winds around. In fact, I took one out of my pumpkin plants the other day because I didn't quite get them all. I solarized them last year, and it did help, but I'm still working on it. On the right is the common cat's ear, which looks much like a dandelion, but is actually in a different, it's a different species, but it has a rosette, and it has yellow flowers like dandelions, and it is kind of pretty. Our fields down here in Penn Valley, many of them are full of it, and it's just ablaze with yellow. It's very pretty. Chickweed is in the carnation family. It's a low-growing, sprawling, mat-forming plant. Some of the carnations that we typically think of are well-known flowers, such as the carnations, silenes, rose campion, and baby's breath all fall in this category. Chickweed and spurry are also carnation family. We're just trying to present these weeds in different families or groupings. And in the parsley family, I think a lot of people, or most people, know what parsley looks like. These plants in this family have hollow stems, very deep taproots, small flowers, finely dissected compound leaves. Fennel, poison hemlock, and Queen Anne's lace fall in this category, as do some other weedy pests. Many of these are used for culinary and medicinal purposes. Fennel, anise, cumin, coriander, caraway are all kind of in the culinary scheme of things. And these do attract beneficial insects. Hedge parsley you can see the parsley-like leaves on the slide on the left. This one is another one of my least favorite plants in the universe because it grows a very deep taproot. It has a lot of kind of pretty little flowers, almost like a Queen Anne's lace type flower. But boy, do they produce some burrs. Those little burrs on the right, those little seeds have little hooked barbs on them, and they stick to everything. They come into the house with the dogs and the cats, and they get in your socks and other unmentionable places. So this one I try and pull whenever I find it. Poison hemlock. Teresa mentioned some of the poisonous plants that we have in our area, and poison hemlock is one of them. And it is, in fact, its reputation precedes it in history. It is a neurotoxin if it's ingested, and it is highly toxic. Causes respiratory failure and paralysis. It's important to differentiate it from like wild fennel and Queen Anne's lace, particularly the Queen Anne's lace, because it looks very much like that. However, the poison hemlock grows very tall, much taller than some of the others, although fennel can get pretty tall as well. The leaves are large and they have kind of a fern-like appearance. The flowers on the poison hemlock are white versus the yellow of the fennel. This is a picture, it's not a great slide, but one of the most distinctive hallmarks of poison hemlock as opposed to the Queen Anne's lace is that the stems will be purple and the flowers are a little bit smaller. The Queen Anne's lace has a little bigger cluster of flowers. And I don't know if you can see this, but this is, I'm not going to attempt to hold, this is kind of an opening Queen Anne's lace flower. And you can see these little, I don't know if you can see them, I hope you can. They're little bracts underneath the opening flower. So when that flower opens, you should see these bracts. And if you see those, then you know that this is Queen Anne's lace. And I actually picked this along Highway 20 yesterday because one of our participants in a previous practice session asked about all those pretty white flowers along Highway 20 between Penn Valley and Grass Valley. And they are, in fact, most of them are, they appear to be Queen Anne's lace. And so I don't tell the road department, but I picked one. I get myself into trouble. So this is poison hemlock on the left, and you can see the umbels are a little smaller, a little more spread out. And the one on the right is Queen Anne's lace. And another remarkable thing about a full, a mature, some of the Queen Anne's lace, although these I didn't see it, have a little purple floweret in the center of it, which is part of the kind of the folklore about why it got its name. Evidently Queen Anne was doing needlework or something and pricked her finger with the needle, and the story goes she dropped it a little bit into the Queen Anne's lace. I guess she was probably making the lace. Anyway, somebody can correct me on that story. Amaranthus is similar and to the Goosefoot family. In fact, both these families are very close. Pigweed is also known as low amaranth. Love Lies Bleeding is an ornamental amaranth. And historically, amaranthus have been grown for food, and it does, these plants provide high quality protein. And many of you may have heard of quinoa, which are edible seeds from the Chenopodium quinoa plant, which was actually from Peru, although I think there are people that are growing it here. Goosefoot, in the Goosefoot family, these are plants related to spinach. Beets, Swiss chard, and epizode are in this family. They're very deep-rooted. Many are drought tolerant. A weedy example of the Goosefoot are the lamb's quarters and pigweed. Lamb's quarter on the left, that's a seedling, and it's sort of taking over amidst the grasses on the right, the middle right. And the next slide over is pigweed. it is kind of an ugly looking. So if you look at the good, the bad, and the ugly, this one I think would probably be close to getting my ugly award. Black nightshade is also a toxic plant. The plant is on the left, and it looks although the leaves in the picture on the left are a little lighter green, which is kind of typical of this plant. On the slide on the right with the berries, those leaves look very tomato-like, and tomatoes are in the nightshade family. And so it's just important to be able to identify which nightshade you're consuming, because this one is toxic. And in the grass family are a large number of problematic plants. It's the largest and most widespread plant family. And I mentioned foxtail barley, which is the photo to the right. And you can see those little barbs that when they dry out, they float around and get everywhere and reseed. Orchard and crabgrass are also problematic many times. Bermuda grass spreads readily. It's a good long grass when you want it, but if you don't want it in your vegetable garden, it's a little bit of a pest. Dallas grass is a very weedy lawn grass, has wider blades on it, and it has long, kind of spindly flowers or seed pods on the end. And bamboo is a beautiful plant, and it's best to grow it in pots or find a place that it can be contained, because it can get away from a grower and be kind of a problem. So there are some that are clumping types that are more contained than the running kinds of bamboo, but it is a very nice plant. And in the mustard family, this again, it includes edible crops and also some well-known weeds. And the Brussels sprouts, cauliflower, and broccolis are in the mustard family, as are bok choy. It's the parent source for bok choy, or Chinese cabbage. In the weed category, bittercress is also known as artillery plant because it can really shoot some seeds a goodly distance, and hence the name artillery plant. So on the the yellow plant is field mustard, and the lower one is bittercress. And in the mint family, dead nettle and lamium can be a weed to some. I find the burning nettle a little problematic in some of my areas, although it's kind of pretty. It's just not one that I particularly like to pull out. I always get stung. It does burn a little bit it irritates the skin. And the creeping wood sorrel, or oxalis, is another, some people think it's very pretty. It is kind of pretty. I just don't want it growing and invading in my space, my vegetable, and my ornamental, particularly my rock garden. So I try and keep it at bay. On the right is a picture of a pretty good size spread next to my garden shoes, just to show you how it spreads out. Purslane is a low growing ground cover. It's not deer resistant, and they like it, and it is edible. Claytonia, or miner's lettuce, is a good salad green and was actually used by the miners as a nutritious plant. It's full of vitamin A and C, I believe. White stem filaree is another one that really has kind of taken over some of our pastures here where I live. It has these, the little seed head with the spiky seeds, which you can see turn into these little corkscrew spears. And those puppies are sharp, and they do tend to reseed very easily because of these seeds. And they, the wind blows them, and they kind of are nailed into the ground with those spears and take off from there. Here's a picture of the miner's lettuce on the top. These are California native weeds, bittercress, coyote brush, miner's lettuce, or Claytonia, the other name, and nutsedges, and of course, poison oak. And poison oak, our little mantra is leaves of three, leave it be. And I think most people are aware of poison oak. We have a lot of it in our county. A major weed in Nevada County is the star thistle. It originated in Turkey, then spread to Spain. It was carried to the New World with the Spanish horses. The seeds are a contaminant of alfalfa, which is probably how it got here in the first place. It has a 4 to 6 foot taproot, which pulls water away from other plants. And it does consume millions of gallons of water, actually billions of gallons of water that it can consume in large stands. And it just depletes the natural habitat so much that it is a problem, but it can be managed, and it takes a while to do it, but there's always a place to start. It germinates as long as water and light are available, and it is a winter germinator. So it doesn't tolerate shade, which is why you find it in the sunny pastures around our county. And as Teresa mentioned, Scotch broom is a problem. The seed pods can scatter, and it is a real problem during fire season. So they've been working very hard. Groups have been working very hard to eradicate it in our county. So this brings us to our change. If you have questions, here's the way to present a question to our moderator, and I'm going to turn it over to Susan.